today we're going to do a couple of things on the car. I'm going to kind of show you around some more in-depth information and kind of introduce you to the car. And today I want to do a leak down and compression test and show you guys how to do that before we get started on this whole thing. Engine health is very critical when it comes to making power. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to go, you know, just bolt-ons or you're trying to do a full build. Cylinder pressure is key. So just along the lines of, like, you know, if you have a timing chain issue and you're not sure if you bent valves, or just, you know, the general quality of your engine, you have to start with good information and know where you're at. So that way you don't waste money. You know, you're chasing low power or whatever, so you start throwing, you know, different things at it. And, you know, a lot of guys just waste money that way. So I want to show you how to do those kinds of things. And I'm kind of curious for myself. I mean, the car put down pretty good power, but it does have a lot of miles on it, so we'll see what happens. Let's get started. All right, so let's do a little walk around. This is a 2005 Ion Redline. I bought it from the original owner, who bought it new in 2005, daily drove it, you know, kept it bone stock other than the lowering springs. Got a little bit taller tire on there just for winter, but it's got the original supercharger pulley, you know, the original injectors, which you can see down there. They have the green top. Super clean car. I couldn't be more happy with, you know, with my purchase. I think I paid $2,300 for this. It's got the original factory Recaros, still very clean, very little wearing on the bolsters that they normally get. But yeah, so this car has 224,000 miles. But like I said, it's been bone stock its whole life, so I have high hopes that it's going to have good compression and leak down and everything else. So we'll check that and get started. So whenever doing a compression test, you really want your battery voltage to be 12.6 or higher, because cranking speed can greatly affect your numbers. I've already done that. I've got 12.6 on my battery. So I've already left this car running. I got it up to operating temperature. You really want to do that whenever you're doing a compression test, because clearance change, and to get the most accurate reading on what it actually is going to be, you should have it up to operating temperature or very close. So I'm going to pull the spark plugs. I've already removed the factory spark plug coil cover. Those are T30 Torx bits, if they've never been changed. Sometimes those can be a little tricky to get out, but like I said, the original fastener is a T30 Torx bit. Okay, so whenever removing these coil connectors, you want to pull up on this connector and disconnect it like so. Okay, so I've got all the spark plugs out. I removed those using a 5/8 spark plug socket, and I will be using this Harbor Freight compression test gauge. Nothing special, but I know that it's accurate. I've got all these spark plugs out because you want the cranking speed to be as free as possible. So if you have just one cylinder out, you know, the other three are going to hit on the other cylinders also. So I've got all of those out, and I'm going to get some numbers. Now, whenever doing a compression test, you do want to either pull the injector, fuel injector harness, or what you can do on GM vehicles and a lot of other manufacturers is something they call clear flood mode. And what clear flood mode is, it is a way to shut off the injectors using the PCM. And how you do this is you put your foot all the way to the floor on the throttle, and that will give a signal to the PCM that you're wide open before cranking. And this will shut all the injectors off. So that way you don't have to disconnect anything, and it makes it really fast, super simple. And if you ever flood your car, or, you know, for some other reason, you could do that to shut the injectors off real easy. So we're going to do that right now. So you could maybe hear the throttle body open all the way. I've got my foot all the way to the floor on the throttle. all the way to the floor on the clutch. And I'm going to let this hit about 4 or 5 times to get good readings and see what we got. All right, let's see what we got. We have 210 on the compression. That is awesome because the factory compression rating on an LSJ should be 210. They start out there from the factory. Anything less than that, you're starting to have less than stellar compression. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, as long as they're even, you're fine. Well, you know, if you've got, you know, 150 on all 4 cylinders, you've got an issue. Yeah, they're all even, but they're all evenly worn out, in my opinion. So anything less than 180 on an LSJ is getting pretty weak. It's not uncommon to see them, you know, 195 to 200. I'd still be completely happy with that. The fact that this has 210 is amazing. I'm going to do the other 3 and see where those are at. But I have high hopes. So let's see what those are at. Here goes cylinder number 2. I'm pretty happy with that. You can see that there. Yeah, right at 200. Let's check cylinder 3. Um, 205. Pretty good. And cylinder 4. And that one is at 200. So we got 210, 205, 200, and 200. I think that's right. I think I'm going to do a leak down just out of curiosity. I'm pretty happy with those numbers. I wouldn't have any problem, you know, modding this engine. It's still really strong in my opinion. Maybe a leak down will kind of give us a little bit of insight on where that last little bit is going. But like I said, I'm not super worried about it. We'll figure that out. I will also add, anytime that you're doing a compression test, you want your throttle body to be completely open. When you do the clear flood mode, that actually does both of those things at once. You want to make sure that the intake track is, completely clear of anything, so you can get as much air in there as possible to get that compression. So, actually, I think I'm going to do a fuel pressure test real quick, and then I'll get the car ready to do a leak down and show you guys how to do that. So let's check fuel pressure real quick. Okay, so I've got my fuel pressure test kit. This is a little bit more elaborate than most of you guys will be using. This has all the separate fittings and anything you could need to test any kind of fuel system. This is a snap-on kit, but like I said, you guys can use, an advanced auto, or I know a lot of times you can go to the parts store and, rent these kinds of things, leave a deposit and you can use their tools. So I have removed the little Schrader valve cover, this little guy right here, which is underneath this fuel injector cover that I removed earlier. I got the little gauge. I'm going to hook it up and key on. Now the factory fuel pressure spec is 58 PSI. Is a return-less style system, which means that there's no return line coming off of the fuel rail. Unless you've modified it and put a return style fuel system, which will probably happen in the future on this car. But I want to make sure that the fuel pump is strong, the fuel filter, which I'll probably change before I really start getting crazy with this thing. But key on, you should hit 58 PSI when it primes. If it doesn't, you've got an issue, maybe a fuel pump relay or something that's not working right. Or, a failing fuel pump. So we're going to key on and see what that pressure is. Let the fuel pump completely prime. Hear it shut off. And we'll see what our pressure is. And we have right around 58 PSI. You could also check this running. I've got the spark plugs out, so I can't do that right now, but that's good fuel pressure. So on to the leak down test. Okay, so we're gonna start this leak down test. I've got the car up in the air. I've got it supported by a jack stand. Never trust just a jack. If you're gonna be under these cars for any length of time or even close, put it on a jack stand, be safe. I don't want to see anything happen to you guys. I've also got the rear wheel chalked so it can't go backwards. Got the e-brake pulled for added insurance, but I've got the passenger side wheel off. I have the inner splash shield pulled down. Got these little clips pulled out. One thing that makes these easier to get out if you don't have the tool, a little flathead screwdriver and a little bit of some side cuts. These are kind of wore out, so I use those to kind of help get behind them. You have 5 that hold it in to gain access to it, and you have a little 7mm screw holding it in. So the crank pulley bolt is a 21mm. I've got a 21mm socket and a couple extensions to reach out past the car. We're going to be using a snap-on leak tester. We got a couple different fittings and whatnot, come with assortment. We're going to use this one because it's going to match what we're trying to do. So I'm going to thread that in. I'm really only going to check one cylinder. There's no reason to go through and show you guys all of this, but this is how you do it. So you want to thread your gauge in, make sure that you get it nice and snug, and you want to be at top dead center compression stroke. The easiest way that I found to do this, I do it at work a lot, it makes things super easy. You're only going to build compression on one stroke, and you can feel that when you crank the engine. Let's see if I can't position this. All right, got a little new position on it. So, like I was saying, you're only going to build cylinder pressure on one stroke, which is the compression, and you can do that by cranking the engine and putting your finger over the gauge. I hear nothing, I feel nothing. See if you hear that? that means I'm coming up on the compression stroke. So what I'm going to do is now remove this. Since I know that I'm on my way up on the compression stroke, I'm going to use a long screwdriver. If it'll fit. Yes, it will. So coming down on the cylinder, hopefully you guys can see that. I'm going to rotate the engine until the screwdriver comes to the top of its movement and it starts to come back down. So you're reaching the top, it'll start to level out. Still coming up. Now you'll have a couple of degrees of rotation where it'll kind of not do anything, and what that is it's sitting at the top of the cylinder. You can kind of check that by going the opposite direction a little bit and see if it goes back down. But I know that I'm right there because it's in between the point where it's moving. So that means that I'm at top dead center, and that is on the compression stroke. So that means that both intake and exhaust valves are closed. The piston is at top dead center, and this is where you want to do the test. So I'm going to remove the screwdriver. I'm going to connect my leak down tester. I've also got a air compressor. I've already had it running for a little bit. Okay, so I've got everything connected. I do have the ratchet and everything off of the crank pulley. The reason I do this is sometimes if you're in between on the top dead center and the rod is at a weird angle, you can force this down and it'll throw your ratchet. It's not something you want to do. Make sure that you do not have that on there if you're doing a compression test or anything, because you will get hurt or damage something. So I've got the air compressor connected. I'm going to turn up on the pressure. You want to get it to 100. And on the left side is my test pressure. On the right side is my amount of leakage. You can see there that I have about 5%, which is amazing. I'm kind of curious if maybe the compression tester wasn't completely tight in the cylinder, because that is amazing on a leak down. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Now, if you have any kind of engine damage and you saw something like that, ignore that side of the gauge, but if you saw 50% or 40% or anything really over, I like to see less than 20, that means that you have leakage. Now, that could be past the piston rings, it could be past the intake valves, the exhaust valves, the head gasket. And one way to check this, if you have 30, 40, 50% leakage, it'll be pretty easy to hear it. One way to do that, you can pull the oil fill cap to listen for air escaping out of there. That would mean that your piston rings or something wrong with your cylinder or piston is damaged. Or you can pull the surge tank cap. You can listen for any kind of bubbling in there, which would indicate a leaking head gasket. Or it could be a cylinder issue again, maybe a cracked sleeve or something. If you've got an intake valve that's bent, which is what typically happens when they jump time, the best way to do that is pull the air inlet tube and open the throttle body, and you could hear air escaping through there. Same goes with the exhaust. You can go back to the back of the car and listen through the exhaust, and a lot of times you can hear them out there too, but you're going through the catalytic converter and whatnot, it will get muffled. So that is a little bit more difficult to hear. If you're really unsure, you can pull an O2 sensor and listen through there, or get maybe a stethoscope on the exhaust manifold. But I am super happy with the results. I might run through these just to check for peace of mind, but again, I have no concern about the health of this engine. But there's a few things for you guys to look out for. I get asked a lot of times, you know, about my car jump time or whatnot. And, you know, people just want to do a compression test because it's easy. But I feel that maybe the reason you guys stop at the compression test is because you don't know how to do a leak down. So I figured instead of explaining or sending you guys to another video, it's best to just show you how to do all this stuff. Anytime you want to start modifying an engine, like I said, this is critical to do. You know, if you're down on power, you know, if you have an issue, these are great things to check. You know, like I said, I'm extremely happy with this. I'm going to start modifying this really soon. All the parts are coming in, and I'm excited to get going on this. I think I might go stage 2, GM stage 2, and maybe throw a 3-inch pulley on it or something like that. I've got a couple of snouts laying around that I could make that happen pretty easy. Maybe put a ported blower on it, and I've got a lot of ideas. So if there's something you would like to see, and maybe we could test it, comment, and do my best to make that happen. But I'm going to remove all of this and put the car back together, and stay on the lookout for another video. Again, thanks for the support, and appreciate it. I left for a while and came back and went to go move the car out and noticed that I have a squeak that has been around for a while, but went away. And I also had a misfire. I could feel it in the car. So I came out and started messing around with it. And it turns out that I didn't have one of the coil pack connectors all the way on. But when I did plug the coil back in correctly, the noise came back. So that leads me to believe that I have an exhaust leak. And for a while, I was thinking that it was from a belt. So I'm going to start it up and let you guys hear that. And so if you ever experience that, you'll know what to look for. Hopefully you can see that. So as you can hear, there's a little squeak there. And of course now it's not as loud as it was, but when I'm driving this thing I can hear it. And I've been thinking it's probably an exhaust leak because it doesn't seem like it's directly in front of the belt, but it does sound like a belt. You can kind of hear it. And when I unplug this, you hear a misfire, but that little chirp went away. So like I said, that leads me to believe, so you come back, that leads me to believe that it's an exhaust gasket leak. It's probably a loose stud or maybe a rusted out stud. I haven't been back there, so I'll have to see what I find. But if you guys ever experience that, there's an easy way to test. You unplug a coil, and if you have, like, say, a rod knock or something that you suspect lower end noise, when you unplug that coil, you reduce the load on that cylinder, so a bearing might not make noise in that situation. And that's exactly why right now when I unplug it, that cylinder isn't firing, so you don't have as much pressure coming out of that cylinder, causing that leak in that chirp. So like I said, I thought that was a little neat bit of information for you guys to see, and stay tuned for the next one.